Hey you guys, and welcome to a new week of What's for Dinner. This one is totally different than anything I've ever done just because I'm finally in my new house. We have our new house and this is our new kitchen, so you're gonna see a lot of stuff maybe you've never seen before just because it's a new kitchen and everything is different and I'm still adjusting to it. So bear with me while I get everything adjusted and moved in. But anyways, all these meals are super simple just because of the fact that we moved in this week and we actually went out to eat 3 different times. So we had to go out to dinner, we had to have fast food just because we were moving and all of my pots and pans were in boxes and the food was packed. It was just complete craziness for about 3 or 4 days. But despite that, I hope you guys all enjoy these meals. And if you are new here, I'd love to have you over at my channel. So go ahead and subscribe down below the video. But let's go on to this What's for Dinner. To get this week started, I decided to start with our meatless meal first. So I just did some mozzarella penne with some sun-dried tomatoes. So to begin, I'm just heating up some olive oil. It's just about a tablespoon of that. And then I'm just adding my sun-dried tomatoes in, and then I'm just going to be stirring this together and kind of heating those sun-dried tomatoes through. You could also be adding mushrooms at this point. I just didn't have any mushrooms. But now once those sun-dried tomatoes are warmed through, I just added in some garlic and I just am going to stir this around and let that garlic get nice and fragrant. A little side note is that sun-dried tomatoes really do burn quickly, so just make sure you're stirring them and keeping an eye on them if you're making this meal. But anyways, I just added my 1/4 cup of some chicken broth. You could also just use veggie broth if that's what you guys prefer. And then I'm adding in my 24 ounces of some marinara sauce. Of course, you guys could use any type of marinara sauce you guys prefer, but I always just use the Prego because that's my family's favorite. Once this has been simmering for about 10 minutes, I just added in my 1/4 cup of fresh basil, along with my cup of mozzarella cheese, and then my 3/4 cup of heavy cream. You could also just use half and half if that's what you guys have on hand. And then I'm going to be adding in my 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, and then you're just going to stir this together and let everything heat through and let that cheese get nice and ooey and gooey. This step is totally optional, but I'm just adding in about 2 cups of frozen spinach. You could also just use fresh spinach, but I just like adding spinach to my pasta sauces because it just adds so much more vitamins that I could just sneak in there. So I just let that heat through all together once again. And then here is my plate all plated up. This turned out so delicious. We absolutely loved it. I'm gonna try it with chicken next time, so I'll just cook some chicken along the side, but this was a hit. Hi. Hi! For this nice dinner, we decided to make some meatloaf alongside of mashed potatoes. So I'm just gonna start on the mashed potatoes first because peeling potatoes just takes a little while. But anyways, I just peeled these russet potatoes, chopped them up, and put them in a large pot with some water. Now that we started on our mashed potatoes, we're gonna begin on the meatloaf. So I just have this onion right here, and it's just a white onion, and I'm just gonna be chopping it up into small pieces. You really don't have to add onion to this recipe, but if you guys know me, we love onion in this house. Over to my large bowl, I just have my pound of ground beef in there, and then I just added in my onions, my egg, and then my breadcrumbs and everything else. I did want to let you guys know I do have all the exact measurements and recipes linked down below in my description box. So just let me know if you ever have trouble finding them. This recipe actually said to use chili sauce, a tablespoon of chili sauce, but to substitute that, I just added in Worcestershire sauce just because I didn't have any chili sauce on hand. Those are seriously all of the simple ingredients you guys are gonna need. I just stirred this all together. I ended up having to use my hands just because the ground beef was still a little bit frozen, unfortunately. But anyways, once I was done combining this well, I let this sit for about 10 minutes just so those breadcrumbs and everything gets nice and combined together. I just used my casserole dish for this part, but you could use a 9x13 baking dish, that would work well. But I just put in some parchment paper. The reason I used parchment paper on this is just simply because I did not want to have to really clean my pan very much afterwards. I was just feeling lazy that night. But anyways, I just poured that meatloaf in there and then shaped it into a loaf. And then I kind of just ripped off the overlap of the parchment paper and stuck it into the oven. Now that our time is almost up for the meatloaf, we're going to start on the meatloaf sauce. All this is a half a cup of ketchup along with a fourth a cup of mustard and then 2 tablespoons of some brown sugar. I did want to let you guys know this original recipe said to use a half a cup of chili sauce instead of the mustard. Like I said before, I didn't have any chili sauce on hand, but if you do, go ahead and add the chili sauce and let me know how it goes in the comments down below. I'd love to hear how it turns out for you guys. But anyways, I just stirred this all together, and once that meatloaf was out of the oven, I just brushed it on top with my cute little brush right here and then stuck it back into the oven to get that sauce to cook into the meatloaf a little bit. Now that dinner is almost ready, I'm just gonna finish up our mashed potatoes. So I just added in about a half a tablespoon of some butter, along with a half a cup of milk, and then probably a half a cup of mozzarella cheese and a little bit of salt and pepper. I love making my mashed potatoes like this because they always turn out so creamy and delicious. I just think adding that mozzarella cheese adds so much extra flavor. But anyways, that is how I make my mashed potatoes. Here is my meatloaf out of the oven. In my opinion, this recipe was good. It was not my favorite meatloaf recipe ever. In the comments when I was reading about this recipe, everybody said it was their favorite meatloaf of all time. But I do have my favorite meatloaf of all time recipe, and I will link that one down below along with this one for you guys in case you want to make that one. But anyways, we just served this alongside of the mashed potatoes and a side salad. For this nice dinner, we just made some couscous along with some chicken and spinach. To start, I'm just chopping up 1 white onion into pretty small pieces. Now that we're through chopping up our onion into small pieces, we're going to begin on the chicken. I just have 2 chicken breasts right here, and I'm going to be chopping them up into smaller strips, I guess you could say. Moving over to my saucepan, I just added in a tablespoon of some olive oil, and then once that was heated up, I just added in that chicken, and I just let that chicken cook totally through. Back here to this little pot, I just added in my water, then my oil, and I just let this come up to a boil for my couscous. Now that my chicken is all cooked through, you're going to be adding in your onions at this point. Of course, I totally spaced and forgot to add in the onions at this point, so I just added in the rest of the ingredients, which were just the diced tomatoes, the water, the garlic powder, the basil, the oregano, and then the salt and pepper. Back here, now that my water is boiling, I just added in my couscous. It's just the wild mushroom and herb couscous. It only takes 5 minutes to cook, and I was really impressed with it. It was such a good brand, so I do suggest this couscous. But anyways, now is the part that I realized that I forgot to add in the onions. So now I'm adding in the onions, and I just mixed everything together, and I just let this simmer together for about 10 minutes until those onions get nice and soft. This step is definitely optional, but once that was all cooked through, at the very end, I just added in about 2.5 to 3 cups of some fresh spinach, and I just let that wilt down. Here is my plate. I'll put it up. This meal came out so good. To be honest, this was one of my favorite meals out of the entire week. It just had so much flavor, and I totally forgot how much I love couscous. I need to make it more often. For this meal, I made pork cuppanies in a skillet. To get started off, I'm just adding this pound of sausage to my saucepan right here. This recipe calls for a pound of ground beef. Unfortunately, you guys know we're moving and I could not find the ground beef in the freezer. I just feel like somebody threw it away by mistake, so I had to use my ground sausage, but it turned out fine. But once that ground sausage was cooked through and I drained the grease, I just added this packet of dry onion soup mix, and I kind of just mix that all together. And then the next thing I'm going to be adding is our diced up tomatoes. It's just a 16-ounce can of that. And then for our long grain white rice, I'm adding 3/4 cup of that. And then for our water, I'm just adding 1.5 cups of some hot water, and then I just stirred this all together. And you're going to want to bring it up to a simmer for about 25 minutes or until that rice is cooked through. Here it is all cooked together. On top, I just added some mozzarella cheese. If you put hamburger in this, you're probably going to want to add some sharp cheddar cheese, but this turned out so good. If I were to make it again with the sausage, I don't think I'd add the dry onion soup mix. I don't know what I was thinking. I'd probably add a tablespoon of Italian seasoning instead of the dry onion soup mix, but if I do go to make this with hamburger, I would make everything the same way except for add sharp cheddar cheese on top. But this was so good. I just served it alongside of a side salad. I do recommend this recipe. You guys are definitely in for a treat on this one. I made some copycat Buster Bar ice cream cake, I guess you could say. If you don't know what Buster Bars are, they sell them at Dairy Queen and they're just so good. But anyways, I did have this recipe, so if you go to make this, just know it's typically for a 9x13 baking dish unless you half it. But anyways, I just put in half of that package of Oreos into my gallon size Ziploc bag. It was just about a 14.5-ounce package of Oreos that was halved. And then I just brought them over to my 8x8 baking dish and poured them in there. And then I added my 1/4 cup of melted butter on top of that. And I kind of just mixed that all together and then spread that Oreo mixture out as even as possible on the bottom of that baking dish. Now this part is very simple. After I just crushed those Oreos on the bottom of the pan, I just had my vanilla ice cream. I did let this sit out for a minute just so it got softened. Of course, it should have been a little bit more soft than this, but I just used about half of that container of ice cream and just spread that on top over the Oreo crumbs. Here's a little side note, if you use the bottom of a spoon, it will spread out so much easier than a spatula. And then I just have some unsalted peanuts right now, and I'm just pouring in as much peanuts as I kind of want. I just poured in enough to cover that ice cream, and I just stuck this into the freezer while I started working on our fudge sauce. Into my little saucepan right here, I'm just adding in my cup of some semi-sweet chocolate chips along with my 1/4 cup of butter and then my cup of some powdered sugar. And then the last thing you're going to be adding is about 6 ounces of evaporated milk. And you guys, seriously, that is it. All you have to do next is just melt this down and then bring it up to a simmer. Once it is simmering, you're just going to let it simmer on a low heat for only about 10 minutes. And then once that 10 minutes is up, it should be nice and creamy and thick and looking so beautiful. And then from there, you're just going to take it off of the heat and let it totally cool down. Now that our fudge sauce is completely cool and no longer hot, I just took the rest of the ice cream cake out of the freezer. Then I just poured this fudge sauce right on top of it and spread it out as even as possible, of course. And then I just stuck it back into the freezer for about 3 hours. Here we are about 3 hours later. I just took this out of the freezer. I do suggest cutting this with a warm knife. I just put this knife under some warm water before I cut this. But anyways, this came out so good. This is one of my favorite ice cream cakes of all time. It's not identical to the Buster Bar, I guess you could say, but it has a lot of similarities. This is just so delicious. I really do recommend this recipe. It is such a good summer treat. And that is a wrap of this week's What's for Dinner. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got plenty of meal inspiration as always. But anyways, I can't wait to share next week's video with you guys because I will finally be moved into this kitchen and I will have all of my cooking utensils and everything just out in the open so I don't have to be searching for boxes from them. But anyways, if you are new here, I'd love to have you over at my channel, so go ahead and subscribe down below the video. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.